Tonight, what song will you be playing for us this afternoon?
Hi, everybody. I will be playing a Gigue from the Sonata in D minor by F.M. Veracini.
It's a very tough act to follow, so well done. I also want to recognize that I did hear that Dr. Harvey Smith also participated in AXO. So thank you, Dr. Harvey Smith, for that, and thank you again for the wonderful performance. Now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker this evening, Mr. Tony Norman. Mr. Norman is an award-winning columnist at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where he has worked since November 1988. Tony began his career at the PG as a clerk, but was quickly promoted to a pop culture music critic in 1989. In 1996, Tony gave up the music beat to begin his general interest column, which dealt specifically with the intersections of race, politics, and culture. During his time as a columnist, Tony has won more than 24 local, state, and national awards, including first place in the National Society of Newspaper Columnists competition. This year, Tony won the Keystone Award for Best Columnist in the state. Tony is also currently working on a novel about a reparations scam in the 1990s. I know we've all been holding our applause, so thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Tony
Norman. Thanks. It's really good to be here, and I'm actually not going to read all these pages I have here, so you don't have to worry about that. Before I start, I just want to say that 42 years ago today, well, not today, sometime this month, and we're in June, right? Um, I was a finalist for the NAACP award for high school students, and this is in Philadelphia, and it was held by the North Philly branch of the NAACP, and you know you would get $500 if you won, which was a lot of money in 1978. Yeah. And so it was something I was looking forward to winning because I had been on the cover of the Philadelphia Inquirer for art, for painting actually, and I won all these writing awards and art awards, and I was pretty well known student artist in Philadelphia, and I just thought, I think I'll just kind of sashay into the NAACP and pick up another award because I could use that money. I literally had no thought that I would not win because I invited my family to come and watch me, especially my big mouth sister. So in my competition, it was just three of us competing for it, and the other folks, one guy, he was doing drawings that he had copied or traced from the cover of Ebony magazine. Like J.J. Walker of Good Times. That was like one of his things, and I was doing abstract stuff, but it was stuff that had won me awards. So it comes to that part of the night where they announce the awardees, and I am absolutely confident. It's just three of us. They announced the names in reverse order, and they announced my name first, third prize. And my grandmother completely misunderstood it. And she said, "Come on, get on up there. They're calling your name." And I said, "They're calling my name because I lost." And my sister just burst out laughing. And then in the car ride home, I'm really inconsolable. I mean, I wasn't, I was teary and just because I had counted on that money. I told everyone I was going to win it. And so I said, "I will never, ever stand before the NAACP again." And 42 years. And I thought about that. What's funny, when I was driving up here, it was like, wait a minute, this is the NAACP. What am I doing? But I get here and I'm surrounded by all you great people here, the talented 10th NAACP. I mean, you guys are really, really something. And I am so glad to be here with you, sharing this evening. And last week, I visited civil rights museums and landmarks in both Birmingham and Montgomery, Alabama. And there was a time when these two cities were ground zero for the aspirations of Black folks across the country. It was in Alabama and other southern states where the battle for voter enfranchisement for Black people was at its most intense. In an effort to recreate the drama and the humiliation of those days, the Legacy Museum in Montgomery has reserved space in its gallery for poll tax surveys and jelly bean jars. You know what those are. It didn't matter if you were a doctor, an elevator operator, a physics student at a nearby HBCU, a transplant from a wealthy Black community up north, or a world famous jazz musician. If you were Black, you had no rights a white municipal clerk was obliged to respect. For those who care to jump through the same hoops earlier generations did in their bid to exercise their constitutional rights, You can try to recite from memory the obscure legalese tied to the Alabama Constitution, the longest state constitution in the country. If your memory isn't that good, perhaps you can interpret some impenetrable piece of law to the satisfaction of a white municipal clerk or cop who may or may not have even graduated from high school. If all this seems beyond the pale, then you can try to guess the number of jelly beans in a jar, or how many grains of sand are in a 4 cubic square block of sand. If you can do any of this, then the white civil service workers of Alabama in 1960 would have been happy to register you as a voter. Even white folks couldn't answer those questions, but it was black folks who were subject to the poll tax because they presented a specific threat to the social order. Because of their numbers, their votes had to be suppressed. Otherwise, they would have had a numerical advantage in every election and would eventually end up running things. This has always been the primary logic of voter suppression. A fear of being marginalized by those who were once marginalized. Access to voting is considered war by other means if you had a monopoly on the ballot box for centuries. For those in power in the 1950s and 60s, the drive for equal access to the ballot box was seen as an existential threat because it would force white economic interests in the South to treat black folks as just another group of special interest constituents to be placated. That was unimaginable for those who consider black people subhuman. In America, the right to vote has been governed by both a gender and racial litmus test for most of our country's history. The first national presidential election that all Americans could vote in without fear of a poll tax was 1968, Nixon versus Humphrey. That means our democracy is a mere 54 years old. Many of us in this room tonight are older than American democracy, no matter what the Yankee Doodle propagandists say. What January 6th reminds us is that we're still close enough to the bad old days to excite the passions of those who want to bring back the bad old days. Today, literally today, the US Supreme Court stripped the state of New York of the ability to regulate concealed guns. This is a direct result of Americans choosing not to vote in 2016 or to vote for a scoundrel just to see what would happen in 2016. Had Hillary been elected, she would have had 3 Supreme Court appointments and would not have softened the ground for the lunatic-friendly politics we're dealing with today. I should apologize in advance. I'm going to probably sound a little bit partisan. I know people are used to me being very even-keeled and even-handed and fair to everyone, but I'm going to sound like a partisan because I am. Because Trump was elected and appointed 3 justices hostile to the interests of the folks in this room, we now have to hold our breath every time there's breaking news. Tomorrow, we'll probably hear about Roe v. Wade or affirmative action, both of which are expected to be struck down. Voting matters, ladies and gentlemen. The last 5 years are proof of that. So this evening, I'm going to read to you several columns that have made the case for being a more electorally alert voting public. And the first one I want to start with is actually quite personal, and it deals with the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act in 64 and 65. I'm an old guy, so as you'll hear. No, right? I was born a second-class citizen. I wish that was hyperbole, but it isn't. People who were born into slavery at the tail end of the Civil War were still alive when I took my first breath. Though their testimonies weren't included in history books mass produced for America's school children, they existed. Because I was a child, I didn't know how circumscribed my existence was by law and tradition. I learned my ABCs shortly before the US Senate began debating the merits of H.R. 7152, a piece of landmark civil rights legislation that emerged from the House of Representatives. The 1964 bill debated in the US Senate was designed to end racial discrimination and segregation in most spheres of American public life. Then as now, a two-thirds vote was needed to cut off the filibuster in the Senate that had dragged on for months. The question of whether people who looked like me were entitled to be first-class citizens, including the right to vote, was the most debated question in American politics. For decades, Southern Democrats, much like their spiritual descendants in the GOP today, successfully wielded the filibuster to stymie progressive legislation. The big difference is that in those days, members of the Senate were unapologetic about using the filibuster to preserve discrimination. Today, the filibuster is defended in the name of good order and protecting the rights of the minority party. And the Democratic senators in the position to dispel the noxious cloud of procedural legalese and end the veto exerted by a Jim Crow relic over our national politics lack both the moral imagination and a broader view of history required to meet the moment. I don't remember what I was doing on June 10th, 1964, when 27 Republicans and 44 Democrats worked together to finally end the filibuster that had bogged down every piece of significant civil rights legislation since the collapse of Reconstruction a century earlier. On June 19th, 1964, the same Senate chamber where dozens of proposed civil rights legislation had gone to die for decades, witnessed the passage of an ambitious civil rights bill that had been almost unimaginable until it happened. On July 2nd, the House took up and passed the Senate version. In a signing ceremony at the White House televised to the nation that same day, President Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law. It was the moral equivalent. It was a moral equivalent of the Emancipation Proclamation for millions of Americans who were only free on the pages of children's history books. I don't remember what I was doing on that hot day 57 years ago when, with the stroke of a pen, LBJ jolted American democracy from the patriotic somnambulance of the previous century into a recognition that we had a long way to go to fulfill our democratic potential. I can't possibly account for what I was doing that day, nearly 6 decades ago, but the romantic in me would like to think that maybe it was the same day that my mom, instead of being annoyed by my incessant whining for ice cream, uncharacteristically picked me up for a sprint behind the slow-moving Mr. Softy truck as it made its way down the block playing its circus-like theme music at top volume. Now, did she really buy ice cream for all the kids who streamed after the truck with us, as I vaguely recall? Probably not. But I remember a day, most likely that summer, when after chasing down that truck with me in her arms, she bought me an ice cream sandwich instead of the much cheaper vanilla ice cream cone with sprinkles that had been our routine. I like to think it was her way of celebrating the signing of the Civil Rights Act in the only way a 4-year-old would understand, through the deliciously exquisite pain of brain freeze caused by the first ice cream sandwich I ever had. Whenever it happened, it created an indelible memory of a summer that has never gone away. And the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was followed by LBJ signing the Voting Rights Act of 1965, legislation designed to cement the civil rights gains of the previous legislative session, in which Southern politicians were already hard at work trying to circumvent. Specific legislation was needed to outlaw literacy tests at the polls, especially in the South, where Black voters were often required to recite whole sections of state constitutions or interpret obscure sections of the law before being allowed to vote. The fight in the US Senate over the Voting Rights Act was as contentious as the fight over the Civil Rights Act the year before, but it passed by a shocking 77-19. And after a month-long debate in the US House, it passed by a vote of 333 to 85 on July 9th, 1965. LBJ, who used the presidential bully pulpit more effectively than any American president since FDR, happily signed it into law on August 6, 1965. Suddenly, the US Attorney General could investigate the use of modified poll taxes and other sneaky workarounds in local elections that Southern Democrats had come up with to keep Jim Crow on life support as long as possible. In 1966, the US Supreme Court helped the federal government in its quest to bring recalcitrant states into line with civil rights laws by definitively banning the use of all poll taxes in state and local elections. Poll taxes in federal elections had already been banned in 1964, but Confederate dead-enders and other states' rights advocates had managed to hang on to a shrinking island of voter suppression for another few years. And realizing that they were losing a culture war that had enshrined inequality as an American virtue for centuries, their rhetoric changed from openly advocating white supremacy to protecting the integrity of the vote, which I know sounds familiar. They wanted to protect the integrity of the vote from unqualified voters. They predicted would flood the polls and imperil democratic apartheid in America. They especially hated those provisions of the Voting Rights Act that required states that had historically discriminated against blacks to get federal permission to make any changes, from redrawing precinct boundaries and establishing voting hours to moving polling places and designing the ballots. This is all familiar because it all came flooding back after 2014. Since 2014, the US Supreme Court under Chief Justice John Roberts has done everything possible to reverse the democratic momentum embedded in the Voting Rights Act by weakening the section that required states to get federal permission to make changes that would disproportionately affect voters of color. The assault against voting rights didn't begin with the Trump administration, but it was exacerbated by the empowerment of a hostile Justice Department and the appointment of three very conservative Supreme Court justices who agree with Justice Roberts that racial discrimination is no longer the existential threat to democracy it once was. As a practical matter, the Supreme Court has given state legislatures the right to make it more difficult for all citizens to vote as long as absolute access to the ballot box is denied to those who are slowly being disenfranchised. If you can make it to the polling place to vote, you can vote. But if you can't get there, if you're standing in line, a long line, and it's 8 o'clock and the polls have to close, and there's only one place that you can vote, you're out of luck. Weakening the provisions of the Voting Rights Act that make it possible for the federal government to interfere with the power of the state to regulate voter access to the polls has resulted in hundreds of laws being passed by Republican-controlled legislatures in the last few years to roll back ballot access. Fueled by the maniacal ex-president's big lie about the 2020 election being stolen, the reconstitution of Jim Crow voting patterns and voter suppression schemes across the country is being couched as voter integrity and not an attempt to correct an overreach of federal power that has been tolerated for far too long. These aren't even clever updates of the arguments that kept Jim Crow enshrined for decades before LBJ strong-armed the US Congress into doing the right things. Still, one almost has to admire the brutal efficiency with which this stealthy multi-front campaign against democracy is being executed, despite the fractiousness of the modern GOP and its descent into cultic Trump worship. I have 3 grandsons who are 2 years old and younger. Well, this needs to be updated, 3 years old or younger. It's an old column. They were born with rights and opportunities recognized by law and tradition that I didn't have at their age. No one in the generations that came before me would have dreamed that the rights I have now would even have been possible, despite the lofty rhetoric of this nation's founding documents. Though my grandsons are decades away from experiencing the creeping angst of disenfranchisement, it is the duty of every citizen who still has unfettered access to the ballot box to feel anxiety on behalf of every member of their generation and vote accordingly. I was born into a period of American history where my status as a natural-born citizen was upgraded by a president who challenged the encrusted prejudices of the American people and their congressional representatives. He was enough of a realist to know that the complacent people that he was enough of a realist to know that complacent people convinced of their own righteousness rarely do the right thing. And because of this, I never lose focus on the fact that our democracy is literally younger than I am. Despite what the history books say, I may not remember the great civil rights battles that swirled around me in the early 60s, but I know they are what made my current life possible. I'm grateful to every soul who stood up, who marched, who picketed, who legislated, and voted on my behalf. Their sweat equity made me a first-class citizen. As January 6th reminded us, democracies are fragile. The right to vote is a precious generational trust that those of us with even the vaguest memories of the world before the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts are obliged to protect. We're no longer children chasing ice cream trucks down the street. This is a democracy if we can catch it. All right, I'm going to read to you the column that I wrote, and it's a shorter column, thank goodness, that I wrote to run on Election Day 2020. So this ran before the quote stolen election, the day of the stolen election. Ha. What to do when your democracy is on fire? Vote. Everyone's on edge. Now is not the time for irony or speaking in parables. I get that. There are too many sleep deprived folks walking around today with dry mouths and heart palpitations to engage in the usual election day bromides about civics. No one's in the mood for gestures of fake neutrality. Our democracy is on fire. People are freaked out. Bland sermons about the act of voting somehow being more important than the outcome itself amounts to journalistic malpractice and an abdication of citizenship when the stakes are this high. To paraphrase one of Mr. T's catchphrases, time to cut the jibber jabber. I know a modern version of Stoicism designed for the anxiety-producing drama of the Trump era is growing in popularity. But as admirable as the ancient Greek philosophy is in many ways, it would be insane to treat the monumental choice facing our democracy today as if it were just another choice and a day full of choices. This is for all the marbles, folks. The anxiety that you feel is well earned. It's akin to the fear and trembling that those fleeing slavery felt as they navigated the Underground Railroad to freedom. This is not a day for playing around. This is a day for following the political equivalent of the North Star to freedom. Anyone think I'm engaging in too much hyperbole? Those who watch footage of the Biden administration, of the Biden campaign bus hurtling down a Texas highway surrounded by a pro-Trump caravan of MAGA pickup trucks over the weekend knows a profoundly anti-democratic spirit has been unleashed in the land. And of course, Mr. Trump tweeted moral support for a blatant act of voter and candidate intimidation. In my opinion, these patriots did nothing wrong, the president, who has no discernible moral compass, tweeted on Sunday, despite news that the San Antonio FBI office was investigating the incident. Instead, the FBI and Justice Department should be investigating the terrorists, the anarchists, and the agitators of Antifa who run around burning down our Democrat-run cities and hurting our people, he said. In New Jersey, several hundred cars are also flying Trump flags down the Garden State Parkway like a rogue ISIS cell, purposely held up traffic and caused delays on Sunday morning. The same thing happened on the Mario Cuomo Bridge spanning the Hudson River in New York, thanks to 300 cars driven by Trump supporters that blocked and slowed down traffic that afternoon. Will there be a serious federal investigation of these acts? As long as the Attorney General Bill Barr is calling the shots, it's doubtful. Mr. Trump has already pronounced these acts of intimidation on the eve of the election patriotism. So the agency he controls, like a ruthless mafia don, will back off. It's become a cliche to describe the threat to our democratic republic as existential, but it truly is. The Trump presidency is severing the fabric of what few bonds of affection between citizens of different political philosophies we have left in this country. I've witnessed decades old friendships fall apart because of this man. There's no escaping this ugly truth. Our democracy is on fire. For the first time in my 3 decades as a journalist, I have a sign on my front lawn advertising my presidential preference. In previous years, I asked my wife to resist the urge to put a lawn sign out, even when Barack Obama began his historic run, and we already had a framed picture of me and the future president sitting on our mantle. When 2016 rolled around, I was somehow able to talk my wife out of putting up a lawn sign for Hillary Clinton. I'm sure I spouted some high-minded gibberish about looking neutral for the neighbors, despite writing a very opinionated column twice a week. I might have even thrown in some twaddle about not technically being allowed to put up lawn signs because I was a member of the PG's editorial board at the time, and that would likely violate some long cherished norm in journalism. It was all part of a weird kabuki dance of hypocrisy that a lot of journalists engage in, especially when it comes to voting and presidential elections. 2 months ago, our perennial discussion about whether or not to put up a partisan lawn signs in the lead up to election day was a lot briefer. The only question we debated was which Joe Biden, Kamala Harris sign would best bear the weight of our combined patriotism until November 3rd. There's no time for tut-tutting or debating the propriety of truthfully expressing one's opinion when the stakes are this high. Our democracy is on fire. This is no time for being coy. This is the most significant election of our lifetime. Today, an engaged plurality of the American people who haven't voted yet will determine our nation's future like no electorate has since the eve of the Civil War. And speaking of the Civil War, as much as it pains President Donald Trump to be constantly reminded that he's no honest Abe, he knows he would at least make a passable Jefferson Davis if his sudden veneration for Confederate monuments weren't so nakedly opportunistic. The only upside, if you can call it that, is that it has finally filtered down to even the least attentive citizens that elections have consequences and that the lack of participation in elections can have dire consequences too. The projected turnout today is expected to exceed any election in American history. That's the upside of being terrorized, I suppose. But it can't stop there. In order to repair the damage to our country by this president and his traitorous sycophants, we'll probably have to maintain this level of voting engagement for the next 5 or 6 election cycles to beat back one demagogue after the other who will attempt to inherit Mr. Trump's mantle and fire up his base. 4 years of Donald Trump was enough to demonstrate how fragile our democracy is when an entire political party is captured by an authoritarian. Our democracy is on fire. Time to grab a hose and vote. This is no time for dispensing wet wipes. I like that line. Yeah. Oh, no. Here's one. I think we have time for one more. What sort of time do we have? We have time for one more, right? I hope. You know, the importance of the vote can't be overstated. You know, when you think about the sacrifices of those black voters, going way back to post-Reconstruction. When your choices were literally between, well, who's the least racist of the racists that are running? Why in the world would black people risk lynching, risk the humiliations, all of that, to exercise the right to vote in a vacuum? When your choices are just so demonic, what drove those people to do that? It's part of who we are. It's part of our American DNA. It really is. Because without those acts of heroism, we would not be here today. Literally. We would not be here. A multiracial group of people meeting would be impossible without the sacrifice of these folks who were humiliated, who were literally lynched after they voted, who were asked to, how many jelly beans are in this jar? How many grains of sand are on the average beach? Imagine. And here we are in this democracy. And some of us actually, not people here, some folks actually have the temerity, the audacity to say voting doesn't matter. Those people are not your friends. This is a story about Independence Day, which is June 19th, 1865. This week, the U.S. Senate unanimously passed a bill establishing Juneteenth as a federal holiday. After the House voted 415 to 14 in favor of the bill, it made its way to President Joe Biden's desk, where he signed it into law on Thursday. And in the lead up to this legislative victory, there was the usual caterwauling by Republicans about wokeness and identity politics. Still, most Republicans voted with the Democrats because of the bill's symbolic and practical value at a time that may prove to be as politically volatile as the run-up to the Civil War. Before last summer's George Floyd protests, the vast majority of white Americans and a high percentage of black Americans, especially young people, had never heard of Juneteenth, despite the fact that dozens of states recognized it informally. The protest against police brutality that prompted a deep dive into the roots of systemic racism in America had collateral benefits. Once formerly shadowy corners of American history finally became illuminated. Stuck at home for 15 months, intellectually curious Americans took a look at and reflected on obscure and unflattering narratives about our shared history most have never been taught in school. During this period of national soul searching, Americans learned of a day set aside by blacks who consider it truer to their aspirations for freedom than Independence Day on July 4th. June 19th, 1865, dubbed Juneteenth by people who once hid the scope and breadth of their creativity to survive. It was a celebration of the day that formerly enslaved black Texans learned from Major General Gordon Granger of the Union Army that the war was over and that they were free. The fact that they were hearing about the end of slavery 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation freed them, because they were in Texas, didn't temper their joy in the least. They dropped the tools of their uncompensated labor in the fields to walk into a landless, jobless, despised future with only each other, their meager belongings, and a fierce desire to cast off the degradation of 250 and 46 years of slavery to sustain them. They were eager to make the transition from a land that subscribed to freedom but tolerated slavery. The former slaves were not utopians. They knew the post-slavery reality wouldn't be easy, but they were more than up to the challenge of translating the horror and despair of the previous 2 centuries into the blues and areas of an unfettered and unparalleled American future. That first Juneteenth in Texas was the Independence Day promised by every 4th of July celebration that specifically denied to 4 million people of African descent. Juneteenth had social and political implications, but the celebrations that arose from it in Texas and many Black communities throughout the South in the decades that followed were also aspirational. Juneteenth came upon those enslaved men and women in Texas 156 years ago like a shooting star that crashes into a nearby field. They woke up that morning either resigned to the backbreaking routine ahead of them on that hot, dusty Monday, or they were fixated on schemes of escape to Mexico or to free territories or Canada. What they didn't expect was General Granger's proclamation in Galveston ending their years of involuntary servitude. Because the news of the outside world was kept from them, they didn't know that the Confederate forces of General Robert E. Lee had surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox on April 9th, thus ending the Civil War and smashing the institution of slavery in America a few months before General Granger's arrived in Texas. They also had no idea that President Abraham Lincoln, who issued the Emancipation Proclamation that theoretically freed them 2 years earlier, had also been assassinated less than a week after winning the war. Some of them had heard rumors of the Emancipation Proclamation years earlier, but even those wisps of hope had been excised from their memory by plantation cops well practiced in the art of demoralizing people who yearned for freedom. But those Black Texans stood exhausted from however many hours of uncompensated labor they had already invested in the heat of that day, listening with incredulity to officials of the Union Army tell them that they were free. They were not given land or resources to make their freedom practical, but they were free to make the best of their emancipation in a reunited but still fractious America. The fact that they survived at all is a testament to their ingenuity and resourcefulness. Imagine the tears of joy that flowed on that first Juneteenth. Imagine the release of intellectual and spiritual adrenaline that such a dramatic pivot towards freedom produced in those who had been told they were nothing but highly evolved chattel the day before. That's why Juneteenth has been celebrated by many Black communities and families ever since. 6 generations after that incredible day in Texas, many African Americans continue to feel an acute connection to the moment freedom finally arrived for those still toiling on the southwestern rim of the Confederacy after the war was over. Celebrating Juneteenth is also about recognizing how crucial information was routinely kept from African Americans by those determined to profit from slavery for as long as possible. This week, a Fox News personality and several Republican politicians who don't bother to hide their animus towards of Black Americans denounced the move to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. Some called it an attempt to make critical race theory the reigning ideology of the land, while others sneered at the identity politics of a party addicted to political symbols and racial nostalgia. Never mind that those most vociferous in their opposition to Juneteenth also happen to be the same folks who defend those trying to stop the removal of Confederate monuments from public spaces. As if by some perverse cue this week, Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott signed into law legislation to stop teachers in his state from instructing students that contemporary political controversies are in any way the result of systemic or institutional failures rooted in the interpretation of American history that argues that racism and slavery are central to the founding of the United States. Republicans are increasingly inclined to deny the basic facts of American history because they believe the facts are by definition injurious to the esteem of those who prefer a sanitized version of American history, where July 4th is the only Independence Day the country needs. They insist that an ahistorical version of American history is better than the real thing because it upholds the most ideal versions of American values. How will teachers in Texas be able to teach the full meaning of Juneteenth without talking about the racial history that spawned the necessity of the federal holiday in the first place? Ironically, Juneteenth was already a holiday in Texas, but prior to last year, it existed in a space somehow decoupled from the ugly narratives of American history. A few weeks ago on Memorial Day, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Bernard Kempter refused to remove a section from his speech at an American Legion post in Ohio, crediting newly emancipated blacks with creating Memorial Day on May 1st, 1865. He wanted to acknowledge history, not GOP orthodoxy. Mr. Kempter explained how 10,000 people, mostly former slaves, free blacks, and their white abolitionist allies, paraded in their finest clothes to a mass gravesite in Charleston, South Carolina, containing the remains of Union soldiers. His microphone feed was cut at that section by organizers who considered those facts at odds with the spirit of Memorial Day. That post is now suspended for censoring Mr. Kempter. In Race and Reunion, the Civil War in American Memory, historian David Blight writes that the black people who marched to the site in Charleston containing the remains of the soldiers were conducting the first Memorial Day parade. Their respectful but joyous celebration presaged the many that would follow. Juneteenth and the first Memorial Day are rebukes to the legacy of white supremacy that made federal recognition of these holidays necessary. Neither are about identity politics. Both are about a nation acknowledging the tragic complexity of its past while striving to be a better place for all citizens in the future. Yeah, thank you. I could read all day, but the point of all of these columns, and when I was doing an audit trail to find out how many columns I had written that mentioned voting or the importance of voting and so forth, since 1996, I had done just a little shy of 100. So it's something that I've been obsessed with, but didn't particularly realize it until I was writing a standard speech about the importance of voting, and I kept using lines that I already used before. It's like, oh, I used that before. That was in a column. That was, I was like, I'll just read the column, but it definitely is something that I think we can never get tired of saying, I believe that our democracy is teetering on the edge, and I'm not being hyperbolic. I truly believe that, and it's not even a matter of Democrats versus Republicans or whatever. I believe that enough people have given up on democracy to walk away and to accept what happens as long as gas prices come down. And I think that that is going to be injurious to all of us. In the past, it was just minorities and women who were so oppressed. But now it's generalized. It's going to be every American. And if we get used to the status quo of diminishing rights, if we think that it's normal for the Supreme Court to systematically disenfranchise us, to say, no, you cannot have fill in the blank. You cannot do this, you cannot do that. These rights that you thought were inalienable are not. They can be taken away. And your vote determines who's president, who's in the Senate, who's in the House, what laws are pursued, what gets debated. And if you don't take that franchise seriously, it will wither and die. And so, yeah, what you're doing here at this Coraopolis branch of the NAACP is the necessary work of democracy. If you don't do it, who will? If you don't take it seriously, who will take it seriously? So thanks for inviting me and tolerating this going on and on and on. But I get passionate about democracy because I don't want to be a slave again. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. We do have an award for you. Is this?
All that?
We would never rescind it. What kind of host would we be? No, I'm joking.
42 years later.
And that's a great point because this is the first annual banquet that we're having, so you will be the recipient of the first keynote award. So
Finally, the NAACP is doing something for me.
I'll take $500 down there.
I'll have my glasses.
presented to Tony Norman in appreciation of serving as the keynote speaker for the Coraopolis NAACP First Annual Freedom Fund Banquet.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're great. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you, Tony. That was very good. I was definitely inspired and taking in what you had to say. You know, you should think about being a writer one day. At this time, I would like to invite the members of the AXO committee to come up here and join me, if you will. Veronica, Terry, Mike. Cynthia, where's your husband? So let me tell you about AXO while they're making their way up here. AXO stands for Afro Academic, Cultural, Technological, and Scientific Olympics. It is a competition of the mind type of program for African American students grades 9 through 12. Students compete in STEM, humanities, visual arts, performing arts, culinary, and entrepreneurship. There are 32 different categories that the students can compete in. This year in April, we held our very first competition, and you heard one of our award winners earlier, Sinai. So now I'd like to invite you back up here. Come on up here. Keely, I'd like to invite you up here as well. So you met Sinai Horn earlier. This one here, this is Keely Brown. She's from Beaver Falls. Let's give her a hand as well. So let me see where we're at with these two. So Keely was a silver medalist for poetry performed, and she was also a gold medalist for short story. Congratulations. And Sinai was a gold medalist for instrumental classical. The members who made their way up here, we have Terry Washington, Michael Hauser, and Veronica White. Those are the ones that can make it today. You come over here and join me, please. Dr. Alicia, would you come on up here, please? So Dr. Harvey Smith here is the new president and CEO of Pittsburgh Technical College. She was just inaugurated, so I'd like to congratulate her on that. She supports the AXO program, and because of PTC, along with Highmark Healthcare, we were able to offer these two young ladies $500 worth of scholarships to go towards their scholarship fund. Congratulations, you two. In the book, you see we have 6 medalists. Because of UPMC, we're able to give the other 4 $500 to go towards their scholarship fund as well. So we're very excited about that. I think that's pretty good for our very first year out. Now, award time, right? Now it's time to give out a few community awards. Yeah, sure. Olivia told me make last announcement for the raffle over here, because we're getting ready to raffle off some stuff. Oh, and West Side ladies, Crystal over there just filled out an application to join the branch. Say hi, Crystal. I'm just letting you know. And she's already said she's going to help plan the Women's Excellence Luncheon. All right, I'm just letting you know. Okay? All right. Here we go. All right, so our first award is called the Foot Soldier Award. In recognition of your hard work behind the scenes and dedication to helping the Coraopolis NAACP right some wrongs in the communities that we serve. 2021-2022 Foot Soldier Award goes to Corey Woods. Corey is unable to join us. He is getting over COVID. So, okay, yes. Our next award is the Activist of the Year Award. In recognition of your fight for better living conditions in the community, the Activist of the Year Award goes to Sheila Permenter. Sheila also is unable to join us. She had to fly to go and help her sister. Educator of the Year Award. In recognition of your lifetime dedication to educating our youth to help make this world a better place, Educator of the Year Award goes to Alicia Harvey Smith. Finally, somebody's here.
You're full of surprises. I was not expecting this. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes.
You're welcome. All right. Next one is Community Service Award. In recognition of your dedication to our community and always being the first one to volunteer, Community Service Award goes to Reverend Tiffany Badalini.
Thank you so much. Oh, wow. Thank you.
Let's get a picture.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to thank my lovely assistant here. Woman of the Year Award. In recognition of your hard work and dedication, not only in the community, but to the Coraopolis NAACP branch, the Woman of the Year Award goes to Allison Marine. She also is not able to join us, but I spoke with Allison earlier. She's very touched, and she sends her thanks and wish she could be here.
This is the Man of the Year Award. Thank you for all the countless things that you do for the Coraopolis NAACP branch. And I'd like to present this to our president, Carter Spurl. Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting that. Okay, so this last one is called the President's Award. In recognition of your tireless effort and the work that you do for the Coraopolis NAACP branch, it gives me great pleasure to give this to Heather Dixon.
Heather loves kissing babies. She wished there was one here today. So these last two that I have before we give away all of this right here, I want to give this to two special people who really believed in the branch enough to become our first Silver Lifetime members, Michael Hauser and Cynthia Hauser. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to turn it over to Heather.
Not ready.
Heather says she's not ready. Wow. That means I get to entertain for a little bit. Let's see, what shall I talk about? I really like talking about me. That's what I like to talk about. What do you think of that? Does anybody have any questions about the NAACP? How about that? No? No questions? We're about 65 members right now. They got 66 because Crystal's joining. Any other questions? Well, I'll tell you, again, we're thinking about working on voter registration, which I think is really needed in the areas that we serve. Looking to do it at Shelley Jones Park on Saturday, September 24th, 10 o'clock to 4 p.m. Looking to partner possibly with League of Women Voters. I see you back there, Michelle. She's going to be the new president of League of Women Voters. Michelle Noel back there. Just stand up, Michelle. And Black Voters Matter. Jamal, are you still here? He's not here. Anyway, oh, there he is, back there. Stand up, Jamal. So we're looking to partner with these organizations to go all through Coraopolis, Swickley, Moon Township, to get people registered to vote. Now, of course, with us being nonprofit, we're not allowed to, be partisan, stuff like that, like a speaker is, you know what I mean? But we're excited to do that. We're looking to have a nice rally, music, food, games, prizes, things of that nature. Okay, and West Hills ladies, I'll be signing autographs. Okay, taking pictures. You can take a picture with me. Stuff like that. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Yeah. All right. Swickley I Group, I don't want to leave you guys out either. You know what I mean? We're going to come back over to Swickley again sometime. Make some things happen over there. Right? You going to invite us over, Richard?
Always welcome.
All right. There you go. There you go. While I'm thinking about it, Lincoln and Ava, can you come on up here? Turn around, face the crowd. I talked to these two before they got here. Well, when they got here, their mom told me they were extremely nervous. Well, at least Lincoln was. Ava loves the spotlight. But I thought they did an excellent job. What do you think? Let's give them another hand. See, it wasn't so bad, right? Of course, you knew that. You good, Lincoln? Yeah. All good. You feel better now? Yeah. All right. Not so nervous anymore? Yeah. Something you want to say to the crowd? You do? Oh, he wants to talk. Go ahead.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, guys. You can go back now. I told them last Saturday that if they messed up, they'd have to eat slop for a week. Ava asked her mom, "What is slop?" Her mom told her what slop. Yeah. Her mom told her what slop was, and she said just that. We're not doing that. That's just not happening. So they did an excellent job. They don't have to worry about slop. Heather, you ready now? 1 second, she said. I got to talk for 1 more second. What do you think of that? Carol, you good? Oh, that's right. We're still doing that. Okay, here we go. Turn the floor over to Heather Dixon. There you go.
All right, guys. So, basket number 1, the number is 776168. 776168.
Yeah, there you go. Fair warning, I once won all of these.
Well, then I think you need to stand up here. All right, basket number 2, 776003. All right, basket number 3, 776027. 027. Right. If you want to grab your basket,
You're number 2.
number 2, and there's a tag on the actual basket. Yeah. Number 3, 027.
027.
All right, you're number 3. Basket number 4 is 063. The last 3, 063. 776. All right, your basket number 4. I'm just going to give you the basket. You can take it back to Carol. I'll grab it for you.
Number 4?
Yep. Number 5 is 776129. 776129. 129. All right. Basket number 6 is 775884. 775, you got 884. 6, yeah.
I just want to get for somebody.
You're lucky. You're lucky.
I am. I'm
right.
on the winning ticket.
Basket number 7 is 775822.
775?
822.
Okay. Ah, there you go.
All right. Number 8 is 776223. Yay! What did I win?
Okay.
Number 9 is 776224. No, it's not. It has to be somebody else. Random winner. 775830. 775830. Number 9. Number 10 is 776070.
He's got 5?
Yeah, 9. All right. 15 is 776069.
You're up to 15.
No, not really. It should be it was out of order. 776069. Was that you? You again?
No.
Oh. Yes.
Which one is that for?
15 776069. Gotta be somebody in here. Okay, we'll try again.
15.
15 didn't answer.
Okay.
Oh, it is her.
There she goes. Now, what are you doing? I got 11.
Yeah. 11 is 776072. You're getting unseated.
She did.
Do you have 6-9 too? All right, number 12 is 775769. Number 12. Number 12. 13 is 775783.
What is it?
775783.
Yeah. This is number 13.
All right.
Debbie? Oh, yay.
Debbie got 13. All right. Number 14 is 776174.
Okay, so you have to get your number 1 with. Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. All right, that's it.
Did we get 15? Oh, she had 15. Never mind. Cover it.
This one's yours, Kelly.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, 50/50 is $50, and it goes to 913405. 913405. Woo!
Ain't me. All right. We're good. I need to tell them when the pirate drawing is.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay, everyone. So one announcement is the pirate drawing is at our July meeting, July 16th. I plan on winning those tickets. Sky Blast Extravaganza. Those young guys are playing pretty good right now. I think I'll go visit them. Did you enjoy the evening tonight? I want to thank Michael Hauser, our announcer. I thought he did a great job starting us off, Mike. A wonderful mistress of ceremonies, Olivia Benson. I thought she did an outstanding job. It's not easy standing up here being pregnant like she is, but you didn't know she was pregnant. She hides it well. I want to thank Heather and Carol for doing the raffles for us. And then the three lovely ladies that you saw outside, Marianne, Dana, and Terry, you stand up so we can thank you for the job that you did, getting everybody in here in an organized fashion. I want to thank our bartender, all of our wait staff here, all the cooks and everything. Thank you for doing an outstanding job. Montour Heights, thank you for hosting us this evening. And with that, Reverend Tiffany, sorry about that. Come on up here and give us a benediction and take us home.
Well, I think we have to give him and Carter another round of applause for everything he does for the community. So as we all depart from this gathering tonight, we want to ensure that the blessings of the Lord be upon each one of us. We ask that you would bless us, O Lord, and bless all of our endeavors so that we might be able to serve, to love, to be a light, to be a source of power, to lift each other up, and to be an inspiration in our community. Lord, continue to illuminate our paths, continue to strengthen us on our journey, and continue to make Coraopolis a city that has greater love, greater opportunities, and equal opportunity for all people. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. One last thing I want to mention is we have our meetings every third Saturday of the month, 10:30 a.m. to 12, at the location in Coraopolis called The Hub. It's a nice venue, and I really want to thank Jen and her husband for hosting us at The Hub. They didn't have to do that, but they gave us a place to call home for our meetings. So I want to thank The Hub for having us. And with that being said, everyone drive safe tonight, and we will see you next time.
Bye, Eric. Bye. Nice meeting you. Okay, right. Okay.